Dear friends, in our readings today, we have two tragedies. One, we can call it a national tragedy. That is the first reading. And the second tragedy, a personal tragedy in the Gospel. In our first reading, we have heard how Jerusalem fell. We have the story of the downfall of Jerusalem, of the kingdom of Judah, and how the population was taken into exile to Babylon. That happened in the year 586 before Jesus Christ. And you can imagine the suffering it brought to the people of God, to the people of the kingdom of Judah. The first reading gives us many details, beginning with the famine. So Jerusalem is under siege. For a long period of time, the people are being surrounded by the Chaldeans. And within the walls of Jerusalem, people start experiencing hunger, famine. So you can imagine the situation of people inside. And we have been told what happened to the king, Zedekiah, as he escaped with the fighting men. They caught him as he was reaching the desert of Jericho. They caught him there, abandoned by his soldiers. The king, abandoned by his soldiers, and his court, brought to Nebuchadnezzar, who gives him his sentence. And imagine again, the king is blinded. But before they blind the king, they had his sons brought in front of him and slaughtered as if they were animals, so that their father will see how the children are being slaughtered. And after slaughtering the children of King Zedekiah, himself was blinded. And put the chains, fetters, iron, and taken to Babylon. And not just him, but also the elite, the rest of the population, the people followed. They only left farmers and as the people who take care of the vines and the farms. But majority of the population taken. What used to be the pride of the people of God, the temple of Jerusalem, is profanated and burned. And the walls of Jerusalem down. That is what happened to the people of God. And it was not just something we can say, well, it's a military defeat, but the house of the Lord being burned. So the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, can claim that our God is a superior God to yours. You can imagine the suffering of the believing people of God. They are taken to Babylon, far from the land. And we have an echo of their suffering through the responsorial son. You remember the famous song, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept when we remembered Zion. They wept when they remembered Zion, when they remembered Jerusalem. What they used to enjoy, the blessings they used to enjoy in the house of the Lord, their own city. They are suffering people. So this is a tragedy, national tragedy. And this can also connect well with what our own people went through. My dear friends, many people who left Jerusalem and were taken to Israel, they never returned back. It is true that some will come back, but others, they never returned back. They died in exile. They never came back. Never came back. And they died far from the land. So it connects very well with the story of many of our brothers and sisters who for centuries, imagine, they were taken out of Africa to go to Arab countries, sold as slaves. So they died there without even their own family members knowing what happened to them. For centuries it happens. And then you have this transatlantic slave trade. Also for centuries. Our brothers and sisters who went to the Americas, taken out of the continent, they died there. Some people during the crossing, others as they were there, never connected to the land. And I visited Elmina Castle in Ghana, and I also visited the castle in Gore, in Ile de Gore, Maison d'Esclaves. Very painful. When we hear the stories that you can be members of the same family, they will take the father one direction and the wife another direction, or family members separated like that, never to be connected again. Now, let's put ourselves in the shoes of those brothers and sisters of ours who were taken as slaves. When they remembered their own land, when they remembered Africa, when they remembered the kingdom where they were taken from, deep suffering. But just like in the case of the people of Judah, they never lost hope. And we know what comes next, the rest of the story as we read the Bible. So we also pray that we will never lose the memory, first of all. Because sometimes it's very sad that the people in Africa or of African descent, they tend to be disconnected with their own history, disconnected with their land. And this is very painful. But here we hear the psalmist saying, no, let my tongue cleave to my mouth if I remember you not. So it's very important for us to remember our history, to remember our land of origin, to remember our continent of origin, but above all, never to lose hope. Because God is always on the side of the oppressed people. So that is one of the lessons we can draw from our first reading. In our gospel, we have a personal tragedy. A personal tragedy. Because a leper was not just somebody suffering physically. If you read the book of Leviticus, especially chapter 13, verses 45, 46, it tells you about how a leper should or must behave in society. You have to live very far from people. And when you are coming close to people, to avoid people entering into contact with you, you have to shout, unclean, unclean. So that when people hear unclean, unclean, they will keep afar from you, lest they get contaminated with a ritual impurity. And the way you dress, you have to be wearing torn clothes and whatever. And your hair, it has to be in such a state that people know that you are a very suffering person. So it is not just physical suffering, but it's also social suffering. Because you are excluded from society. You cannot go to the temple, you cannot go to the synagogue, so you are like a dead man walking. But you see, what happened with this leper in the gospel? What happens with him is very interesting. Instead of just remaining far from Jesus, and then shouting, unclean, unclean, he comes closer to Jesus, and bows down in front of Jesus. And he asks him, Lord, if it is your will, if you want, you can make me clean. Lord, if it is your will, you can make me clean. This is a beautiful prayer, because normally we as Christians, when we are praying, we are not forcing the hand of God. So the leper is teaching us even how to pray, that always to ask the Lord, if it is your will, not mine. If you want to give me this, then give me that. If you want this, if you want that, then give it. So when we are praying in our petitions, let us never forget that statement, Lord, if it is your will. And what happened with Jesus? Jesus in the gospel does something which tells you that for a suffering person, he's even ready to break some of the details of the written law. He was not supposed to touch the person with leprosy. But what did Jesus do? The gospel tells us he stretched out his hand and touched the man and said, okay, I want, be made clean again. Be made clean. So Jesus touched the person. So it means that according to the law, Jesus himself became ritually unclean. But the holiness of Jesus is such that instead of him becoming unclean, he is now purifying and cleansing everything. He is the Lamb who takes away the sins of the world. All our impurity, he takes them, but he himself remains clean. Because he is holy. He is the Holy One of God. This is something very beautiful. And when this person is cleansed, Jesus applies what the law of Moses says, the book of Leviticus. Go to the priest and show yourself there. That will be evidence for your healing. But that person is not just cured physically. As I said, the person who was excluded is now reintegrated into the community. So dear friends, one last thing now. Let's keep that in mind. When we are seeking healing, when we are praying for healing, and when we are working for healing, it has to be holistic healing. The body, but also the relationships. You know, there are many people who forget that. You are praying for physical healing, and yet, in your community, your relationship with others are not good. You remain an excluded person. You have no contact, you don't talk, you don't communicate with others. So, if you are seeking for healing, let it be full healing. Because many are seeking for individual, physical healing, while actually in the community, in the family, the relationships are suffering. Terrible sickness, terrible leprosy within the family. So as we reflect and we pray over the story of the healing of this man, let us ask the Lord to also come and heal our relationships. And you are going to discover that the better you communicate with others, the better even for your own well-being, personal well-being. May the Holy Spirit enlighten us, and may Christ bring us his full healing. Amen.
Amen.